Love podcasts, hate nonsense, but also love bonus podcasts. Hello.
Yeah. Love a bonus podcast.
Wow.
Hate a bonus lunch.
Yeah. I just got back from Westminster.
You
Sean.
did? How was it?
Well, Nigel Farage was giving a speech. He was introducing the new party chairman. You might remember that the previous party chairman, Zia Yusuf, resigned.
Had a couple of days off.
He did have a couple of days off. Actually, he confronted that. Should we play that clip?
Yeah.
Here it is.
One that has perhaps borne the greatest burden is Zia, who was doing pretty much everything behind the scenes and sometimes in front as well. All of which explains his bid for freedom last week. He crawled out under the wire and was running away in the woods as fast as he possibly could, leaving a trail of not so brilliant tweets behind.
Bit of light humour there from Nigel Farage, who's, Zia Yusuf deeply regrets the tweets that he made. He was very tired. He's back in the party. Zia's very happy about it. He's now heading up UK DOGE. And this leads me on to my question of what I asked Nigel Farage today. So Zia Yusuf will now be heading up this cost-cutting unit. It's sort of like a replica of what Elon Musk was doing for the MAGA movement or Trump over in the States. And on that team is one Aaron Banks. Now, Aaron Banks is a businessman. He was a
Brexit bankroller.
He was a big player in the Vote Leave movement. Now, if you go back a few years, Aaron Banks had a number of firms that were registered in Gibraltar and Isle of Man. I just want to make very clear here that this is not illegal. You are allowed to do this. But
which is great if you're able to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on a multi-million pound turnover, he paid around £12,000 tax.
Shrewd operator.
So what my thinking was, if you are looking to cut costs, perhaps instead of, taking away, it might be better to just fill the coffers, for example.
Yeah.
So I asked Nigel Farage this.
I've got Ava from Joe.
Hi, Nigel. Zia will be heading up the DOGE unit with Aaron Banks, who has previously offshored some of his businesses and not paid the corporation tax that other businesses are expected to pay. I was wondering, with your bold spending plans that you've got, if you are to get into government, will you be encouraging your members to onshore their businesses so that there is more corporation tax in the exchequer?
Sadly, there'll be less corporation tax in the exchequer as people are offshoring as we speak. There'll be several dozen people today that leave London and probably will never come back. And this catastrophic series of tax policies, of anti-entrepreneurial policies, launched by the great Jeremy Hunt, now being accelerated by Labour, people are going overseas. As for Aaron, well, Aaron has businesses overseas, has paid vast amounts of tax in the United Kingdom, happens to be employing quite a few people all around the world. It is allowed. But he has paid an awful lot of UK tax. But I wonder how many Aaron Bankses will be here in 5 years' time. Virtually everybody I know that has been successful in business is considering leaving this country. The last official figures were that 10,800 of the wealthy left Britain. The next set of figures, I don't know what they're going to be. 20,000, 25,000. You've only got to look at property prices in Westminster, Chelsea, Kensington to see they've all fallen by over 20%. Now, that doesn't really matter, and nor does it benefit ordinary folk, because these are houses priced in millions. But you don't make those that are not doing so well in society better off by getting rid of your biggest taxpayers. And given that the top 1% of taxpayers now pay 30% of all tax revenues, we've got a very, very, very major problem coming.
It's interesting that this is the one thing that politicians can come after reform on, I think, that the party itself is able to pin itself simultaneously on the disgruntled masses, i.e. Labour voters and also Conservatives that have lost faith in the party, but also on a more kind of traditional Conservative voter, I suppose, right? This kind of successful business type, the not not illegal tax dodging, but tax dodging in some way.
Well, you're moving money, aren't you?
Yeah.
You are
Yeah,
moving
yeah.
money in order to avoid corporation tax.
Yeah.
And
so it's good when you hear it's always good to hear party policy anyway, but it's good to hear that Nigel Farage there is basically hinting at, no, we are a party that will continue to make business operations easy for multi-million pound people, high net worth people, whilst speaking out of the other side of the mouth yesterday or the day before or whenever on labor relations or whatever it might be. Like, you can say both things when you're a populist, Well,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because the type of person, the type of voter that Nigel Farage is going after is a sort of like guy on the ground, might have an SME, might have he has a small business. He thinks taxes are too high because he might be paying business rates. He might also be paying, VAT. He's also paying corporation tax, maybe he's paying a little bit of capital gains. I don't know.
Yeah. Guy who's not moving all of his businesses to Malta or Isle of Man or,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps for some of these voters, they think that they're included in the I'm going to protect business umbrella, when actually what Farage is talking about here is protecting people who earn tens of millions of pounds or turn tens of millions of pounds over.
Speculative capitalists. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that the question sort of caught him off a little bit there, because the rest of the questions were sort of around the burka row. Should we talk about the burka row briefly?
Yeah, why not?
Because that was interesting today. So
that is ultimately what kind of led to today's press conference, right? If it wasn't for the burka question on Wednesday last week, we wouldn't have had a press conference on the rejigging of the backroom staff at Reform,
Yeah, so Zia Yusuf, obviously, he was responding to Sarah Poshin, who in at Prime Minister's Questions asked Keir Starmer, will you ban the burka? He then tweeted, that's a dumb point to make.
Yeah.
Heavy language.
I think the detail of it was, because this isn't Reform Party policy, it makes no sense to be asking it as a method to push the Prime Minister to do something.
A point, but not a point well made, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess he's getting more on a technicality rather than this is not what us, the Reform Party, are aligned with.
Yeah. Well, do you know what was a good way of it? I thought a good mirroring of that row. Farage today was asked if he would support the death penalty, because there are some of his MPs who do support it. I don't want to say definitely, but I do think Lee Anderson supports it.
I think we're safe enough saying that now. I'm sure we've done graphics on him saying something about the death penalty before.
Anyway, happy to be corrected, Lee. I know you're listening. Happy to be corrected.
He's always in the comments, is Lee Anderson.
How funny if the complaint that we get is not about ascribing him to believing in the death penalty, but the accusation that he listens to this podcast. Anyway, so what Farage, when he was asked about it, he said, look, personally, I see the 500 miscarriages of justice that we've had since the 1970s, and I therefore don't have faith in the justice system to convict the correct person, and so I can't back the death penalty. But he said that it's an issue of conscience, and so if his own MPs want to back it, then that's fine. But it's not going to become party policy tomorrow. And to me, that was
to play with policy overall, though, isn't it?
Well, but it absolutely is. But it's the burka row in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're pushing for this strength of feeling, or you're validating someone's conviction in their conscience about banning the burka, but you're not outright saying it's policy to ban it.
Yeah.
You're sort of being the appeaser, because then you can go to some constituents who might be Muslim and say, we'd never ban the burqa. We need your vote. We want you in the party. And you can go to other voters who perhaps do not like face coverings, and you can say, well, we're cracking down on face coverings in public.
But I feel like he hasn't. I think that's the danger that Farage is going to have as Reform get bigger. When it came to the election last year, there was a lot of talk at the time, right, about the vetting of the candidates, what candidates were getting up to, who and who they didn't believe were shrewd political operators in the 1940s. I think as the party gets bigger, yeah, they're going to have a stronger vetting process. But if your philosophy of managing a political movement is everyone can have differing opinions than me because this is what I see Farage as a totem of right of conservative party political ideology. He doesn't necessarily, as someone who comes from the Conservative Party, doesn't necessarily believe everything that further right than the Conservatives believe in. But he believes in enough for people to think that he does. So things like the burka row is something that I've not seen him personally say that it should be banned. I think even when pressed on it, he's not being drawn on his opinion on it or not.
He goes abstract. He starts talking about Antifa.
He doesn't. Yeah. It would indicate that he doesn't really think that it should be banned in the first place. Now, the opposite could be true as well. But the longer that you sit on the fence of that, and the longer that you try to court both sides of if they want to start eating into a Muslim vote, or whatever demographic it might be, and then you've got a contradictory core base of your party that their ideology is completely aligned against the people that you're trying to bring in, you're going to end up seen as an appeaser or as an ineffective politician in some way. You know, he's leaving himself open for any sort of attack.
I interpret it differently.
Really?
I see him as Teflon. I see him as, like with Brexit.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, like
Boris
Rupert
Johnson
Lowe,
win
right?
in 2019, right? But he never wholeheartedly endorsed Johnson because it gave him the breathing room when if it all went wrong, and I think, you know, we all knew it was going to not pan out the way that it was promised, the sunlit uplands that were promised. He had the breathing room to say, well, that's not what I would have done.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you send the burka row, you send that out. Well, actually, kind of happened to him rather than him being the sort of, well, no, he would have been the masterstroke behind that because he would have actually planned that Prime Minister question.
Yeah, he would have seen the question beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can send that out into the ether, right? And then you almost like focus grouping the country. If it polls well, you go, all right, I'm going to get behind that vehicle. But if it polls terribly or it goes south, you can go, well, I never said it. Sarah Potion said it, one of my MPs. Yeah. And look, that's their conscience. On their conscience, if they feel like that, then that's fine. But he's never the one who said it. So then the accusation never sticks to him. The policy never sticks to him.
Sure. I think two things. One, firstly, I think when it comes to things like Brexit or 2019, he's got a different relationship with that because he was never going to be the political force or the lead political figure after that election, whether he was running in Conservative seats or not. Now that he is the leader of a party that is being tipped to have a significant position after the next election, I think there's more danger around him having no convictions around the policies that, whether it's MPs, whether it's councillors, whether it's activists, want to start pinning on the party itself.
So I don't want to push this narrative. Sorry, I'm not just meaning to like willfully disagree with you all the time. Sorry, this is...
No. As many people do on podcasts like these, we can disagree agreeably.
So I think that cult of public opinion will be with you. They will say if he gets into government, then he will be proven that his policies have no weight and he won't be able to achieve all of the things that he said he was going to be achieving. He'll be held accountable and da-da-da-da. That is that's where the strength of public feeling is. I don't want to push that because I think it's sort of like when, do you know when Trump and Elon Musk got into government?
Yeah.
And I say they did it together because they were like cahoots.
Well, I mean, he was bankrolling him, wasn't he?
Yeah, and just promoting him on his social media site every single day. No one could have conceived the cuts that happened within departments. You know, you could have had the most slick political operator. They would never have told you before the election. You know, we were only really talking about Biden and Trump, and you know, we never actually really spoke about what Trump would do when
it was never going to be that hard and that fast.
Yeah. No one would have conceived that they would have cut the billions that they did. You know, and they were, you know, the ramifications of US aid will not be felt imminently. I mean, they are starting to be felt, but they won't be felt properly, like in the same way that austerity wasn't felt for like
a year's time,
exactly.
3 years' time, yeah.
That's when you really feel it. And no one would have believed they would have cut and slashed as many projects as they did. And I think that if you go down the line of, well, he'll never be able to, Farage will never be able to afford anything because where on earth will he recoup the money from? There are many things that you could not conceive of now being cut.
Yeah.
That someone in that position would cut.
There's money somewhere.
There's money somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that we're hyper-focusing on what he would do to the NHS. There are many other state-provided services that you could go after. I don't think he'd ever cut PIP or anything. I actually don't think he would. I think that...
You don't?
No, I actually think that PIP specifically, I'm not talking about universal credit, I'm talking about PIP.
Yeah.
I don't think that he would do that.
Do you think there's a significant portion of reform voters that will be on PIP in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I think that he would start charging you for GP?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
I think he's regularly on record saying that, right? Like he totally references France.
But universally.
All the time. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that commentators get ahead of themselves. Not you, but other commentators get ahead of themselves with saying like he'll never be able to achieve this. I'm like, I think that our Westminster mind can't conceive of like because we're in the bubble the whole time. You can't conceive of like the realm of possibility.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's a case of whether he'll be able to achieve things. I think it's a case of to what extent is he going to be taking policy from party activists, councillors, MPs, and to what extent is it just going to be, this is what Aaron Banks tells me, this is what Zia Yusuf tells me is the direction of the reform movement, you know? Because they are two very politically opposite forces. The kind of the millions and millions of pounds of whether it's what was it that Zia Yusuf was in? It was like a venture capital company that he sold.
Should not be making claims about that.
No, I just read it before we came over. It's it was a venture capital company similar to what Jacob Rees-Mogg was in, but Zia Yusuf sold his a couple of years ago, and then you've got Aaron Banks as well. But then what you see as a reform voter is nowhere near that. They are not the people that reform voters are. And so who is it that Nigel Farage is going to listen to? Because the people who are candidates for reform are these people, by and large, not those people. Well, your Rupert Lowe's maybe, but it seems like they're building a base around the Lee Andersons of the world, the Sarah Pochins of the world, rather than the Aaron Banks and Zia Yusufs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Lee and Sarah are the public facing.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So that's I guess what the reckoning is.
Aaron and Zia are like the businessmen that know how to cut, private business who know how to cut costs.
Yeah.
But they're kind of faceless.
But that's the difference, is that like when you look at the MAGA movement, like people like, I guess Trump isn't a great example, but the operators in the MAGA movement are not Rust Belt, hillbilly types. You know, they are metropolitan elite. They're right-wing metropolitan elite, but they are still a metropolitan elite.
They don't pitch themselves as that.
They don't pitch themselves
JD
as that.
Vance is like, I'm Catholic, I'm at church on a Sunday,
Yeah.
here's my family.
Yeah.
I'm getting stuck in with the childcare.
But I wonder
When
where...
actually there's a couple of nannies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't know. I think culturally, politically, it's all quite interesting that he is going to have to... How do you either blend them together, or how do you mask... I guess he already is, to some extent, masking, this is what we are going to do, but we're giving you a little bit of red meat every now and again, and you'll be happy with this, you know?
And that's a question that we will have to solve on another day.
And why didn't you ask him today?
Next time.